투스팟은 여기. 한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
Coming up on Arirang News. Israel's escalated offensive in Lebanon continues with its aerial campaign overnight, having targeted a potential successor to the late Hezbollah chief in Beirut. Meanwhile, with Israel's revenge on Iran expected, U.S. President Biden says Washington is mulling over supporting Israel striking Iran's oil facilities. After several rounds of months-long negotiations, South Korea and the U.S. finally reached a deal on sharing the costs required for U.S. troops stationed in the country. As the Busan International Film Festival attracts movie lovers to flock to the Marine City, we introduce to you some groundbreaking films and emerging directors worth taking note of.
Welcome to the 9 p.m. edition of Arirang News. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. We begin with escalating turmoil in the Middle East. Israel continues its major attacks on Lebanon, this time targeting Hezbollah's intelligence headquarters. Lebanese authorities have reported dozens of deaths. Yoon reports.
Beirut was shaken by powerful blasts overnight, marking some of the heaviest Israeli strikes on the city so far. Large plumes of smoke rose from Beirut's southern suburbs on Thursday after multiple Israeli attacks on the area, one of which targeted Hezbollah's intelligence agency. The Israel Defense Forces said in a statement that they attacked Hezbollah's intelligence headquarters, responsible for aggregating intelligence about Israel and its military. This follows Israel's airstrike on an apartment in a central area of the city that left at least 9 people dead. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, more than 35 have been killed and more than 150 wounded in bombing attacks across the country in the past 24 hours. Israeli media reports suggest that Hashem Safiaddin was a possible target, a prominent figure in Hezbollah and a cousin of Hassan Nasrallah, former leader who died recently from an Israeli airstrike. He is viewed as a potential successor of Hezbollah, and Israel is working to eliminate anyone associated with it.
We are very determined to destroy this infrastructure and kill whoever is there. We will not allow Hezbollah to settle in these places in the future. The severe damage to Hezbollah in all areas in Beirut, in the Lebanon Valley, and South Lebanon will continue.
Reports say that the Israeli military has ordered residents of 20 southern towns in Lebanon to evacuate immediately, signaling a possible escalation in their ground operations. The civilian nightmare that started in Gaza has now expanded to Beirut, where people face the looming threat of an Israeli strike on their country.
In southern Lebanon, 37 health facilities have been closed, while in Beirut, 3 hospitals have been forced to fully evacuate staff and patients, and another 2 were partially evacuated.
The World Health Organization reported that almost 30 health workers in Lebanon were killed in the past day and called for a ceasefire. Yoon, Arirang News.
Staying on international front, U.S. President Joe Biden says his administration is in discussions over Israel's possible attack on Iran's oil facilities. This has led to a surge in oil prices. Cha Eun-kyung has more.
U.S. President Joe Biden said on Thursday local time that his government is in discussions over supporting Israel striking Iran's oil facilities. Before leaving the White House en route to Florida to the area hit by Hurricane Helene, when President Biden was asked what if he would support Israel attacking Iran's crude facilities, Biden said that the government is discussing it. Later, the State Department said that the administration was still in talks with Israel and believed that no decision had been made yet. On the political front, eyes are on Biden's unclear stance, since President Biden has previously said he would not support Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. As Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Iran will pay a heavy price for Tuesday's attack, Israel is expected to launch its retaliation on Iran soon, raising fears over a wider conflict in the Middle East. Meanwhile, the possibility of an Israeli attack on Iranian oil infrastructure has since caused market worries, leading to a surge in oil prices. U.S. West Texas Intermediate rose toward $74 a barrel after surging more than 5% on Thursday, while Brent closed near $78. Crude oil prices has soared this week as the escalation of tensions in the Middle East raised the possibility that supplies from the region could be disrupted. Oil prices has been one of the most important variables in the U.S. election. And some analysts say that the higher oil prices could impact the upcoming election in favor of former President Donald Trump. 차윤경, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. have finally reached a deal on sharing the costs needed for U.S. troops stationed in Korea, after holding 8 rounds of negotiations. Korea's contribution will go up about 8% in 2026 under the new deal. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae-eun-ji has the details.
For the past 5 months, officials from Seoul and Washington have been holding talks to determine how much South Korea will pay for the roughly 28,500 U.S. troops stationed in South Korea. The government explained Friday that the two sides have finally come to an agreement on the 12th Special Measures Agreement, known as the SMA, which will be effective for 5 years, from 2026 to 2030. South Korea's contributions in the first year of the agreement, 2026, will be some 1.52 trillion Korean won, or around $1.14 billion US dollars. That's around an 8.3% increase compared to the previous year. After that, the cost will gradually increase over the next 5 years, based on the Consumer Price Index, to reflect inflation. According to the Korea Development Institute, CPI in 2024 is projected to be around 2.4% and 2% in 2025. So, if the cost increases by 2% every year, South Korea will be paying around 1.67 trillion Korean won, an increase of 19.5% compared to 2025. Applying the Consumer Price Index greatly benefits South Korea as the current SMA, effective until next year, applies the Korean government's increase in defense spending when it comes to determining the increase rate, which is around 4 to 5%. If South Korea were to increase 5% annually, it would be paying over 1.8 trillion Korean won in 2030, 26.7% more than the amount in 2025. Seoul's foreign ministry said the two sides have also agreed to set a maximum limit to the annual increase rate so that it will not go over 5%.
We believe the significant achievement of these negotiations is that while South Korea and the United States maintain the framework of the existing agreement, the two countries have replaced the current measure of applying the defense budget to be used as the increase rate with the annual consumer price index and have reintroduced a limit.
The latest decision comes amid speculation that South Korea has been seeking to reach an agreement before the U.S. presidential election to apparently avoid tough bargaining in case the country's former President Donald Trump returns to the White House, who earlier demanded a 5-fold increase, calling on Seoul to pay nearly $5 billion. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
North Korea has denounced the South Korean president for his recent warning against the regime during the Armed Forces Day speech. Its leader Kim Jong-un also threatened to make use of any force, including nuclear weapons, if the regime's sovereignty is breached. Let's take a look at what's behind its intention.
An abnormal man and a puppet. That is what North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called South Korean President Yoon during his visit to a training base of the North's Special Operation Units on Wednesday. According to the North state-run Korean Central News Agency, Kim said, quote, Puppet Yoon gave a long-winded speech full of anti-North sentiment, and based on how he boasted of an overwhelming military response at the doorstep of a state possessing nuclear weapons, one gets to question whether he is a person of sound mind. This is the first time in about 2 years that Kim has strongly criticized Yoon without addressing him as president. The last time he called him directly as Yoon Suk-yeol was in July 2022 during a speech marking the 69th anniversary of the armistice. Kim's remarks come after Yoon delivered a speech during Tuesday's Armed Forces Day ceremony, where he stated Pyongyang would face the end of its regime should it try to use nuclear weapons, warning of a resolute and overwhelming response from the South Korea-U.S. alliance. An expert says it is indeed quite rare to describe a country's leader in such words, and these words have intentions.
Kim is trying to demonstrate that his leadership is superior to Yoon's in terms of the inter-Korean system competition and to strengthen internal unity within the regime.
Kim also described North Korea as a nuclear-armed state and a nuclear power, adding that if U.S. and South Korea alliance intrudes the regime's sovereignty, it will not hesitate to deploy all disposable offensive forces, including nuclear weapons.
North Korea is using such words as propaganda tools to show it has the upper hand in the inter-Korean relationship, at least in terms of possessing a nuclear strategy, maintaining strong regime unity, and claiming that their leadership is far superior.
Meanwhile, the defense ministry called Kim's remarks absolutely unacceptable and added that Pyongyang would not be able to gain anything from developing nuclear missiles. Saying that any nuclear provocation will lead to the end of regime, the ministry urged the North to stop all actions that threaten peace and stability on the Korean peninsula.
October 5th marks the World Korean Day. In light of this, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo says the South Korean government will create an atmosphere where successful overseas Korean businesses can freely invest in their motherland. He attended the main celebration on Friday for the 18th World Korean Day in Seoul. Han added Korean immigrants around the world are recognized for creating rare success stories in the history of global migration, and overseas Koreans have been companions in the remarkable success achieved by South Korea. Han, emphasizing the Overseas Koreans Agency kicked off last year, said the government will ensure that the next generation of ethnic Koreans can maintain their identity and pride as Koreans through history and language education. The parliament today voted not to approve 3 opposition-led bills that were vetoed by President Yoon Suk-yeol 2 days ago. The bills included 2 special probes, one into the death of a Marine and the other into stock manipulation accusations against the First Lady. Our National Assembly correspondent, Shin-young, reports.
Another cycle of opposition passing contentious bills, the president vetoing them, and the bills ultimately getting rejected after a revote. The National Assembly on Friday voted against approving 3 opposition-led bills that had been vetoed by President Yoon 2 days before and sent back to the parliament for a revote. The first rejected bill called for a special probe into stock manipulation accusations against First Lady Kim Gon-hee. It also aimed to examine alleged interference in the ruling People Power Party's nominations for April's general election. Out of 300 votes cast, 194 were in favor, 104 were against, 1 lawmaker abstained, and there was 1 invalid vote. But to pass a bill vetoed by the president, 2/3 or more of the lawmakers present must approve it, along with the majority attendance. The next bill to be rejected called for a special investigation into the death of a Marine during last year's flood rescue operations and whether there was a government pressure or interference in the initial military investigation into this. Similar bills had previously been passed by the main opposition Democratic Party but were rejected after a revote. The latest version calls for the Supreme Court Chief Justice to recommend candidates for the special probe. The last bill, which requires the central government to financially support the distribution of vouchers by local governments, also failed to secure a 2/3 majority of the present lawmakers. Ahead of the plenary session, the PPP said it would oppose all 3 bills, calling them unjust laws.
The DP special probe bill allows the party to manipulate the process, and if it passes, it would undermine the judicial system. Therefore, it must be stopped.
Meanwhile, the DP plans to reintroduce the bills next month.
We will keep pushing for the special probe bill regarding the First Lady until it's passed and made public.
As the DP also plans to address the allegations against the First Lady during the parliamentary audit of the government this month, political tension between the parties is expected to continue. 신하영, Arirang News.
Prosecutors have sought an arrest warrant for Koo Young-bae, CEO of Q10 Group, in connection with a massive insolvency case involving the South Korean e-commerce platforms Tmon and Wemakeprice. The Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office requested an arrest warrant for Koo on Friday, accusing him of fraud, embezzlement, and breach of trust under the Specific Economic Crimes Punishment Act. The CEOs of Tmon and Wemakeprice are also among those facing arrest warrants. Prosecutors allege that the accused individuals embezzled nearly 1.6 trillion won, approximately $1.2 billion in settlement payments for goods sold. They are also accused of unfair business practices involving affiliated companies and embezzling the company's funds for the acquisition of the U.S. e-commerce company Wish. Meanwhile, the European Union is set to impose tariffs on imports of Chinese-made electric vehicles starting as early as the end of this month. On Friday, its proposal to impose a tariff ranging from 17.8% to 45.3% on Chinese EVs was approved by a vote of the 27 member states. Tesla's electric vehicles produced in China will receive the lowest tariff rate, and the final tariff rates will be applied for a period of 5 years starting from October 31st. However, the EU has stated that it will continue negotiations with China in an effort to address concerns about excessive subsidies, meaning that the decision reached today could be suspended if an agreement is reached. Elsewhere, Ukrainian forces targeted a Russian radar station using long-range missiles provided by the U.S. Yoon has the latest.
The Ukrainian military said on Thursday that it used U.S. Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, ballistic missiles to strike a Russian Nebo-M radar station. The Nebo-M radar is a system that can detect fifth-generation aircraft, like the F-22 and F-35, as well as long-range ballistic missile launches. Ukraine's military says it believes Russia had 10 such operational systems left. The military did not state any details of the strike, including when it had taken place, but said that the destruction of the Nebo-M radar creates a favorable air corridor for the effective use of missile weapons. The long-range ATACMS missiles Ukraine used were sent by the United States in the spring, when Ukraine at the time had committed to only use the weapons inside its own territory, which is also the case with the British Storm Shadow. In the past months, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been urging Western allies to let Ukraine fire their supplied long-range missiles deep into Russia. Washington has not suggested any change in its position of not lifting restrictions. Meanwhile, NATO's new Secretary General Mark Rutte, who took office on October 1st, vowed in his first speech in the post to help reinforce Western support for war-ravaged Ukraine. And just 48 hours after taking over NATO leadership, Rutte made an unannounced visit to Kyiv, where he pressured Western countries to lift their restrictions on Ukraine's use of advanced weapons to defend their country. This comes ahead of a crucial meeting of Ukraine-supporting leaders set to be led by U.S. President Joe Biden on October 12th. Rutte added he could work with whoever is elected president of the United States in November. Yoon, Arirang News.
Over in Taiwan, a strong typhoon swept into the country and relief operations are underway. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Cargo containers loaded at a port in Taiwan were being tossed around like fallen leaves. Shop windows were completely torn off, unable to withstand the powerful winds brought by Typhoon Krathon. The 18th typhoon of the season, Krathon, made landfall in Kaohsiung City in southwestern Taiwan on Thursday. Despite the typhoon weakening upon landfall, winds of up to 140 kilometers per hour slammed the island, damaging power lines and causing 100,000 households to lose power. Schools and workplaces were closed all over the island, while domestic flights were also suspended. More than 10,000 residents were forced to evacuate. The Taiwanese authorities say at least 2 people are dead, while 210 people were injured. 1 person is reported missing. The slow-moving typhoon is causing more damage to the affected areas, while causing flooding in some parts of Kaohsiung. However, the typhoon is forecast to move northward and weaken further into a tropical depression by Friday, bringing rain to neighboring countries, including here in South Korea. The Kaohsiung local government has been especially careful in its disaster preparations after Typhoon Thelma killed 37 people in 1977. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
On the cultural front, continuing our coverage of the 29th Busan International Film Festival, today our culture correspondent Song Yujin introduces some groundbreaking films and emerging directors who are bringing fresh perspectives to the screen at this year's edition.
When the Busan International Film Festival began 28 years ago, its goal was to become the top film festival in Asia and introduce Korean cinema to the world. But as the festival grew, so did its vision. Today, BIFF is a hub for Asian films to connect with global audiences, bringing unknown talents like Korean-American director Soo Kim into the spotlight. Kim, a former television commercial producer, made her directorial debut in 2020 with a documentary that earned her a Peabody Award nomination. Her film, The Last of the Sea Woman, showcased at this year's BIFF, tells the story of South Korea's female divers, the Haenyeo, a community Kim has admired since childhood.
They were so bold and so confident and so fearless, and I just really fell in love with this kind of different version of Korean womanhood that I had seen in them. All the women I could see that were in the ocean looked like harmonies. And she said, that's when she said, this is probably it. I think we're the last generation of the Haenyeo. That's the moment I decided someone has to document this culture before it's too late.
Kim's film shows the daily lives of these divers who continue to work well into their 60s, 70s, and even 80s, diving into the sea to harvest seafood and maintaining a tradition they take immense pride in. As she spent more time with them, Kim realized that the biggest threat to their culture wasn't time.
When I started to learn more about how the environmental crisis has really been affecting their day-to-day work, how it's absolutely disrupting the ecosystem of the ocean, how the marine life is dying, and how it's really becoming one of the major threats to the continuation of their culture. So I wanted to show that.
Pollution has wiped out everything, the conches, the shellfish. There's nothing left to catch, and we can't make a living anymore.
Another director whose dream came true at this year's BIFF is Yutaka Matsushige, best known for starring in the hit Japanese drama Solitary Gourmet. The film adaptation of the same show, which made its world premiere at this year's BIFF, marks his first appearance as a filmmaker.
I always had a passion for cinema because I wanted to make movies. Becoming a director was harder than I imagined, but incredibly rewarding. In the drama series, I just showed up and filmed at pre-selected restaurants. This time, I had to handle everything, from planning to scripting.
The film follows Koro, the main character, on a culinary journey from Paris to Korea, offering audiences the same simple pleasure that made the drama series a hit across East Asia.
The series is more like a documentary, showing a man simply enjoying a meal on an empty stomach. I think that's what made it appealing, especially for viewers tired of typical drama formulas. If this series can serve as a bridge between Japan and Korea, I'd be happy to dedicate myself to it.
With films like these introducing fresh perspectives and untold stories, the Busan International Film Festival welcomes you to experience the diverse voices of Asian cinema right up until October 11th. Song Yujin, Arirang News, Busan.
It was chilly this morning again, but the temperatures recovered. Tomorrow, this clear autumn weather will continue. However, there will be wide temperature gaps of more than 10 degrees, so you'll need to have a jacket. Rain is forecast in most areas except for Seoul and northern Gangwon-do province on Sunday. The amount of rain is up to 40 millimeters on Jeju Island and 5 to 20 in the southern parts of the country, so it won't be much. However, the wind will be strong with rain around the coastline, so the waves will also be high. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gwangju will start off at 13 degrees. Highs will move up to 25 in Seoul, Gwangju, Daegu, Gyeongju, and Jeju. Temperatures will drop slightly due to rain everywhere on Sunday and next Monday. However, after that, clear skies will come back nationwide. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for today. From Monday, Arirang News will be newly reorganized. The main newscast will be at 8 p.m. and with the 9 p.m. news gone, I will now be relocated to the Defense Ministry. Thank you for watching, and I will reach our viewers through reports. Until then, goodbye.
요즘 한국에선 어떻게 노는지 알려줄까?
한국에선 아이돌이 되어볼 수도 인생 번호를 찾을 수도 있지. 제일 핫한 포토 스팟은 여기. 한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.